You are listening to an MLGA Network podcast. Welcome to Make Liberty Great Again, the best damn Liberty podcast that you've never heard of. I'll be your guide as we peer into the ridiculous reality that is our society and our government. Let's get to it. Welcome to Make Liberty Great Again. I'm your host, Cam Harless, and with me today is the host of The Hourly Struggle, friend of Fullerton's future, elite anti-government hacker, chronic malcontent, and the only man to ever come onto my show and give my beard a run for its money, Mr. Joshua Ferguson. How you doing, man?
I'm all right. Thanks for having me.
I should not say this in a recording, but one of my favorite things is to write the introduction for people. And the reason I love it is because when I interviewed John McAfee was the first time I wrote one like that, and he laughed so hard and talked about how that was the best introduction he's ever gotten. And I'm like, every time now.
Yeah, no, I appreciated that. That was good, because the hardest part about being on or contributing content elsewhere is when people ask you to describe yourself. And I'm like, okay, well, there are certainly words that have to be used, and it's just that thing, you know. So, well, yeah, it was good. It was good.
I've known you for what? Have you been in my little cadre of retarded people for the whole time, or?
No. I joined around, I believe it was what had to have been before the 1 year anniversary, I think, because I won that. I still have the keychain for that myself and the other Josh both won.
Yeah.
So before that, but I didn't come over from JSP. I was later.
Gotcha.
It was a friend of a friend who was like, "Hey, you should join this group." I'm like, "Oh, okay. I guess I'm joining this group now."
Well, you've been a good addition. And here's a secret that I've never told you or anyone else. I did run a randomizer for that first year anniversary, and the other Josh won. And I was just like, you know what? I really like this Josh Ferguson guy. I'm going to send it to him too. Legitimately how it happened.
So I actually, in my pocket right now, you can actually look, people can't see, but I'll explain it. I actually have it on my keys still in my pocket right now.
Yeah, so that must have been end of the year of 2017, because that's when I started at the leather store.
Yeah,
and so
I remember when you started there. Yeah.
Yeah, so that it must have, so definitely, 3 years now we've known each other.
Yeah.
But what I've appreciated about you is you are like we talked about before the show a little bit. I don't like using labels because most of the time there's not a lot of utility in them anymore. Like if I tell you I'm an anarchist, that's the closest I'll do for the most part. I have very agoristic tendencies, but I'm not going to call myself an agorist. I feel like the word libertarian has lost so much of its meaning now that it has little utility. And I feel like capitalism, every time you say the word capitalism online, you then have to argue with people about what the word capitalism means, because Marx essentially, defined the word for everyone. And then Rand and Rothbard and those other guys took it back, essentially, took it. I mean, the word libertarian started out on the left. Like, these are all
correct. I mean, Jeff Dyson, I think it was Mance Raider or Pete. I did an episode where they talked about how libertarianism means nothing anymore. And that's even the problem. Even the term anarchist, that's hard, because when you say that word in the zeitgeist, you think black Antifa, because that's how it's bantered around in the press. You don't think Rothbardian. So yeah, I agree. Most labels have very little utility anymore, if they ever did.
And so, and that what I appreciate about you, to get to the point, why I was saying any of that, was in libertarian groups, and in the one that I started, one of those signifiers that has the most hate surrounding it is minarchist versus anarchist. And so you've been on the minarchist side of things, and then a lot of other people on the anarchist side, and I am this enigma that will argue with whoever I disagree with.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always appreciated when you don't partake in the stupid arguments, but only go, hey, I'm going to make an actual argument for this. I'm not going to just say boring bullshit that everyone else says or get mad, because I don't see the point in getting mad anymore. I think Jeff Deist at the not Rockwell, I almost called it the Lou Rockwell event, the Mises event in Orlando, was talking about how most people are post-persuasion. And I have stolen that term since then, and I describe myself as post-persuasion, not insofar as I can't be persuaded, but in that I am beyond persuading others.
Okay, that's almost, I waver on that, because that's an issue for me of sort of between the black pill, white pill problem. Like, so for those who don't know, if anyone's listening, obviously most of your audience probably does, and you obviously know this better than I do. Yeah. But red pill, blue pill, that's the matrix thing. Are you a nerd to the system? Are you aware the system exists and how it's corrupted? And then white pill is optimism, black pill is nihilism. And I waver on those two pretty regularly. Because on that idea, on the post-persuasion thing, I look at my local city, I look at my state, I look at the country in general, and I think, I don't think there's a point. Like, I don't know that I can persuade these people. But then the episode that I just cut last night, that I'll probably release it tomorrow, because I was going to do it today and time went away from me, is basically about the how the police withhold records, how they lie to people, and how accountability can actually force people to see the nuance in the system. You know, there is a way to get people to pay more attention, and that's a very white pilled message in that. But I'm like, but then on other days, I'm like, there's no point. You can't convince people. I can't persuade these people that their roads suck because they throw all their money at bureaucrats. Like, they don't care. Yeah. And so I waver on that all the time. I go from being absolutely, we need to persuade as many people as possible, sort of the Isaiah's Job thing, the Albert Nock piece from the 1930s, where it's the idea of talking to the remnant, like these are the people, there are people we can reach and we need to worry about reaching those. And then it's like, it's all going to burn. Who cares? I'm a collapsitarian today. And then the next day I'm like, no, let's reach as many people as possible. So no, I feel that. I haven't coalesced around one of those yet, because it just depends on the level of optimism and caffeine in my system.
Well, and when I say I'm post-persuasion, I mean it in the sense that, not that I don't persuade people, because I apparently, according to Twitter and the 100 followers I got for making a joke about how it was really you and me, but how I talked someone out of voting for Jo Jorgensen. What have you done for the liberty movement? Like, I had people telling me, oh, well, you've persuaded me not to put my, not to vote, but for president, but rather to make myself free. And I've heard this a couple of times. And so I'm not saying that I'm against persuading people. I'm saying I don't waste my time anymore.
Yeah, I think that's a valuable difference to make, probably because there are people that if you try, we've all done it. We're looking at Facebook or Twitter or whatever, and you see a conversation, you see something, and you have an answer for it. And you're like, this is going to drag into a 5-hour conversation, and this person's not going to be convinced at the end anyways, so delete. Yeah. And there's no point. But there are people you can reach. A quick anecdote on that is actually many years ago, my father-in-law, we used to talk politics all the time. He was a Goldwater Republican, very libertarian leaning, and we used to talk politics all the time. And I mean 4 hours a day, almost every day, because I used to live with them. And one time, if you remember back in the Terry Schiavo case, the lady that was on life support, and he was very pro-life and I was very contract law. And I said, if you don't want your spouse to have control, then there are ways to solve that problem through contract law, through power of attorney and all those things. Now, obviously, there are some states that can overrule that, but we were talking about it, and then we had this conversation. We were like heated, yelling at each other. It was that sort of conversation over the course of days. And at the end of it, he was like, wow, you've actually persuaded me. That's a really good argument. And it was like the biggest win in my life. It was like, this guy is an intellectual giant in my world. I mean, he wasn't known to anybody else. He didn't really go out and do a lot of things that people would with a good CV would know about, but he was a really smart man. He really just did care about research and data and ethics and integrity and all that. And it was like, not that I beat him, but like I persuaded him on this talking point, which means that even the giants can be persuaded. Yeah. And like, okay, that means that if people come in it, so my big difference now is I will only try to persuade people that I think are acting in good faith.
Yes.
If I don't think and I don't mean people that are like you discount people that are cynical or whatever, because I'm sarcastic and cynical all the time, and I'm still arguing or talking in good faith. I mean, you can just tell that person's arguing in bad faith. They're a bad faith actor. I'm not going to waste my time.
Yes.
That person just doesn't care. I'm not going to waste my time. Oh, this person seems like they actually are interested. And I had somebody who left a comment on my YouTube channel. I don't know where she came from, but she left a comment, and it was like, "Thank you. This is the best piece I've seen on this issue, and I'm upset that my peers don't understand the nuance of things." It's like, oh, wow. So I'm being used as an example. So now I feel like maybe I have to try to use that voice and maybe persuade people that want to be persuaded in, let's say, the vestiges of liberty or individualism.
Right. And I believe in persuasion. Like, I don't know how much I did it in 2017 when you first met me online, but I used to be the guy who would argue constantly. I would argue about the Constitution. I would argue about this, that, or the other. And I realized that 98% of those conversations were useless. There were 2% that were argued in the correct place, in the correct way, and outsiders heard those arguments, and I persuaded not the person I was talking to, but people around. And I was like, okay, every now and then there is a time for this. But when I cut out arguing with randos, with people that I could tell, because most people, when it comes to politics, are bad faith arguers. Like they are not there to have a discussion. They are there to tell you that you're wrong. And they're not good at convincing.
They're there to win.
Yeah. That's the long and the short of it. So when I say I'm post-persuasion, it's in more than one way. In one way, it's I no longer feel the need to try to get 51% of the population to agree with me. Because I do feel that politics is a waste of my time, resources, and mental energy. I think my time is much better spent growing myself, making money, investing into my children, and making myself free. And I think that the people who have inspired me the most to change and to accept freedom and liberty weren't the people who were arguing with me, weren't the people who were yelling from the street corners. It was the people that had a message, had thoughts that I cared about, who spoke eloquently or forcefully when needed. But it was the people who I wanted to emulate. They were the people who lived out their principles. And so I will make an argument all day long. I will go on Twitter and say that I talked people out of voting for Jo Jorgensen because I think that's an important argument to have. But then at that point, if everyone who responded poorly were all bad faith actors, there was not a single person on there that responded in any sort of realistic or kind way. No questions. Yeah. Well, there's one question. Right before we got on here, someone asked a question. But most of it has just been like, oh, well, I convinced your mom to vote for Jo Jorgensen, and she kept saying, yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, it's that. Well, that's the thing. It's like, so for me, it's gotten to a point where I like to take counterintuitive arguments now and argue with people who, so I take a little bit of a different tact with politics, like it's that in a second, but I like to argue with people who really do believe what they believe, like the not people who support Jo Jorgensen out of a utilitarian thing for the Libertarian Party, because I know some of them that are doing it in good faith because they care about ballot access or things I just don't give a shit about. But you've also, just out of curiosity, is this a R-rated or G-rated
Oh, you
show?
can say whatever you want.
Okay. I waver sometimes.
John McAfee changed me.
Okay, good. So it's that issue where I know people who actually care about the Libertarian Party and trying to grow the party, and they're doing it in a good faith way. I just disagree with their tactics. And then there are people who are just like the Joe bots, the people who have bats in their usernames on Twitter and whatnot, and they don't want to have a good faith argument. But what I like to do now is I like to argue with those people, or argue with people who are very set in their views, and then make them see the logical conclusions of what they're talking about or the actual ramifications of what they're talking about, because that's more interesting to me, and it's also harder for me to do. As far as politics go, the reason because I'm involved, people don't know, I'm involved in local politics insofar is that I write for a local blog. I ran for office more than once, one that was just a trolling campaign to get somebody recalled out of office, and then I deal with local tax issues. I mean, I run or I work with people who run campaigns against local taxes, trying to lower things. And the reason I care about politics isn't because I necessarily care about politics. Like, I don't care about the RDL nonsense. What I care about is most people who can be reached on liberty-leaning things pay attention to the issues that we care about during political seasons, during election seasons. And they're more receptive to arguments. Now, a lot of times you have to frame them in the argue the left from the left, right from the right, sort of that Scott Horton thing. Mm-hmm. But if you go to somebody on a random Tuesday in an off year and you try to explain to them why the roads suck, they probably don't care. But if it's during election season and everyone's talking about how they're going to fix it all, if you can prove how the people that are running are full of crap, all those other people start to pay more attention and start to listen, and you can reach more people that way. You can talk to people about this is why, like everyone was voting in the primary here in my town. They were voting for school bonds, which was going to raise everybody's property taxes. It was going to rob everybody of more money. So bureaucrats in the school board and what have you can make more money. And when we ran the campaign against it, we were like, this is the 1,100 people whose salaries and pensions are over $100,000 in an area with a median household income of $65K. Like, this is why it's so expensive. This is why they want to raise your taxes. And people went, wait, what? So there is a utility in it to try to reach people without being the rah-rah Republican, rah-rah Democrat, rah-rah Libertarian. I mean, with the conversation we were having that sort of led to that joke of, convincing a friend to not vote for Joe was actually a serious conversation. Yeah. I mean, it was the serious utility of what happens if you vote for Joe, what that signals the Libertarian Party, versus what happens if you vote for Biden or Trump and what that signals to society. And you can have those conversations in an election year. In an off year, it's not as easy because you don't know who's running.
Yeah.
So,
well, and my thing is, politics is very real. And it's like, yes, everyone perks their heads up a little more around election season. I do think that Trump changed things, though, because politics is always now. It's always something.
Correct. I think it was already heading that way because we were hearing the personal was political a long time ago. I mean, that was going back.
Totalitarian lie.
Yeah. Well, Hillary Clinton was talking about that back when her husband was president. It takes a village and all that nonsense. So that's always been there, but it's the mask has slipped so much under Trump that everything is political now. And so that actually makes, for like people like me, that actually makes my job easier because now I can point to the hypocrisies and point to the lies and point to how it doesn't work. And some people, not a lot, but some people will be more willing to listen and pay attention. And again, once you start using counterintuitive arguments, when you talk about, hey, let's look at voting for Jo Jorgensen, you're like, well, let's look at not. Here's why. It can lead to better conversations. And that friend of ours, I mean, he was really sort of confused to begin with. It was like, well, no. This is why I have to do it. I'm like, no. And here's why you're wrong. And then you and I were both going back and forth on it. It's like, yeah, okay, you guys convinced me. I didn't expect that outcome. Well,
I think the funniest thing was that he said, okay, wow. I'm the abused spouse in this situation. They're abusing me, and I'm just going along with it. I was like, yeah. But my point when I say that the answer isn't politics isn't that you can't utilize politics as a means to spread liberty. It's that how to make this clear? That using the political system to make us more free isn't going to happen. However, using the reality of politics, looking at the situation that we're in, the murder, the death, the theft, all of that is a great way, showing that hypocrisy, like you said, is a great way to talk to people about how to be free.
Yeah, I agree. So I get a little iffy on the issue, or a little bitchy really on the issue, because the anarchist take, sort of the Michael Malice take, just grinds my gears simply of the I don't vote because it's just justifying the system. I'm like, dude, the government shuts you out of your work. They shut you out of your gym. They shut you out of everything you wanted to do, whether you voted or not. The system
and that's his
exists.
point. His point is the system exists, and like, have you read his piece that was in the Guardian?
I have. My problem with it was that the system exists. Voting defensively, like voting to actually use the system to get freedom, is dumb. Like, you're not going to. I'll use the Republican argument. I think Peggy Noonan said it a long time ago. Like, when Republicans aren't in power, that's when they actually care about, limited government. And the problem is, like, we need the House. Okay, here's the House. We need the Senate. Okay, here's the Senate. We need the White House. Okay, here's all three. We need the Supreme Court. Oh, get the hell out of here.
Yeah.
That's the game that ends up being played. My problem is I vote defensively.
Yeah.
Because the government exists, whether I vote or not. The government locked my wife out of work, whether I voted or not. If I was a non-voting ANCAP, congratulations, I still can't go to the gym.
Yeah.
I still couldn't go to the movies or anything else. They still did all these totalitarian things. But when something comes up to vote and I vote against more government overreach, that's one more voice saying no.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to use the government to push my beliefs on others or to change things or to take people's rights away or whatever. But unless we're talking about repealing the 19th, and then I'm all about that. But let's
get rid of the 13th first.
It's 13th, 17th, 19th. I got a list. But it's that thing where when a new tax comes up, not only did I vote against the school bond, I have a 1.7 or 1.25% sales tax coming up in my city. It's a 17% increase on our current sales tax on election day this year. I can stay home and not vote, or not only am I going to vote against it, I could possibly work on the campaign to help people fight that, to save everybody money. And at the same time, a little bit of a collapsitarian mindset of screw the city out of the $20-25 million a year they're going to gild from people in order to prop up their pensions and their extravagant nonsense. So I feel like there is a utility in using politics
defensively.
Defensively.
Yeah.
I think offensively, it's almost a fool's errand unless you're in the right strata, the right class. Like Ron Paul to Rand Paul, like those guys can use it offensively to a point, but even most of what they do is defense.
Yeah.
Most of what they do is no, this is what we want to get rid of. I mean, sure, Thomas Massey puts his bill up every year, the one-line bill to get rid of the Department of Education, but even that's defensive. That's getting rid of government. That's getting rid of regulation. And I see a lot of utility with that. The other side of it, no, man, I'm not going to knock on doors. I'm not going to, kiss hands and shake babies to try to gain popular approval because I need 50.1% or whatever to get people to let me do what I think should be done. Nah, that's for the birds.
Well, and
that
for
aren't
me,
real.
The birds were all killed by Ronald Reagan. But that's my thing is if you vote and you're like, especially locally, like I get that. If you want to do that, if you want to vote defensively, by all means do that. I do think that there is little to zero utility in federal elections. See,
I'm mixed on this one because, and I'm going to sort of dive into the conversation that we had the other night. I'm mixed on this because of Trump.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be honest, because I agree with you. I think I live in California. My vote doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter who I vote for. And there almost seems like there's no utility in voting for. Now, senator doesn't matter at all. Like the senators, it's always between two Democrats. It doesn't matter at all in my area. The Republican versus Democrat, House level in my area is no different. They're all basically warmongers and what have you. So there's no point there. In the presidency, I felt the same way. Because, I mean, really, if you're going to tell me there's a huge difference for freedom between John McCain and Barack Obama or Mitt Romney or any of those, I'm going to laugh at you.
Yeah.
But I look at Trump and I waver. Because, like, if you look at the three choices, I did this the other night. And I said, well, what's my argument, my libertarian argument for Joe Biden? There isn't one.
Yeah.
And then, like, the libertarian argument for Jo Jorgensen is what? It's the ballot access, the grow the party, all that nonsense. But what it really does is it rewards a libertarian party that wants to push Marxism, that wants to push leftism.
And it lines the pockets of
it lines the pockets of technocrats and cronies and all of that. The people who've used Gary Johnson's campaign as a bludgeon against liberty people for the last 4 years. The people who who scream at you for being racist if you tell an off-color joke. I mean, that's the people you're rewarding by giving them more votes, because they're like, look, we got the more votes we ever did under Gary Johnson. And if Jorgensen does that, then it just rewards their behavior. Yes. So I don't see that as a net positive. It actually pushes the Libertarian Party, which I feel could be at the local level a useful tool, pushes it in the wrong direction.
Well, and even when it comes to Libertarian Party, for me, especially the national one, I tried to join a local Libertarian Party at one point 4 years ago, and oh my god, it was one of the worst experiences of my life sitting in a restaurant with those people. Like, it was, you have no idea how much autism was in that room.
Yes, I do. I went to Orlando. I was at the national convention. I was at the state convention. Oh, I know.
Well, I have a vendetta against the Libertarian Party, especially nationally, because right now, if you Google Libertarian, one of the first things that's going to come up is the Libertarian Party, if not the first thing, or probably a bunch of articles about Jo Jorgensen.
Yeah,
right?
Fair.
Maybe.
But still related to the LP. Yeah.
It's the Libertarian Party who, in every way, embarrasses and brings down the libertarian philosophy. Like, you don't go to the Libertarian convention or watch 2016's James Weeks moment and have normal people go, oh, hey, these people might be able to represent me. Everything that I see that comes out of the LP National is disadvantageous to people who hold the libertarian philosophy. Yeah. And I despise that. That's why the word libertarian has so little utility now, is because of the Libertarian Party.
Well, I'll go you one better, though, because the problem I have with the Libertarian Party right now is that in my life, and we're pretty close to the same age, but in my life, there has not been a more tyrannical moment with government that I can envision in states nationwide. I mean, the federal government really hasn't done. Everyone blames the federal government because it's easy, but like, Trump didn't lock my state down. Gavin Newsom did.
Yeah.
You know, my county did that. My state did that. I mean, but we're living through times where they're shutting people out of work. They're denying people the ability to go to funerals. They're causing people to cancel weddings. They're doing all these things that are just, you know, if not borderline, straight out tyrannical. And where's the Libertarian Party on all
How
of this?
long did it take Jo Jorgensen to say anything about it?
Too long. The California Libertarian Party, I don't think talked about it even on Twitter for months.
Yeah.
Locally, that was the same problem. Like, nobody was talking about these things. Nobody was having conversations. There's no, like, we're talking on a podcast right now. How many libertarian podcasts are out there? Where is the Libertarian Party messaging to these people, messaging to this veritable army of autists who can actually get messages out? They're nowhere to be seen. It's just sort of ridiculous, and it's really frustrating. So I see the problem that they're not even capable of utilizing the biggest red pill moment in my lifetime.
Yeah.
To push liberty, even if you don't want to push the Libertarian Party, to push liberty. And that's why I wavered, going back to my previous point, that's why I waver on the whole Trump thing. Because I don't care, and this is where libertarians get mad at me, like, I don't care about Trump's record as whether or not it's libertarian. I don't care about his record. I don't get me wrong, I care about what he does. Yeah. I do. But that has nothing to do with waking people up to liberty. Trump being president, he can sit in the Oval Office and twiddle his thumbs. And by virtue of him being president, the Marxist left drops the mask, freaks out, and all of this stuff comes out. There was just a story or a thing I saw today. I got to fact check it, but I think I saw today, and it said the LA County Board of Health lady, the one who, I don't want to be mean, but I'm going to, the one who looks like she's already mummified.
Beetlejuice lady. No, that's Lori Lightfoot. She's the second Beetlejuice lady. Because there are two of these people.
Yeah, and if the third one pops up, then Beetlejuice actually shows up. So, but this lady said, allegedly, I got to look into it, that they expect school to restart after the election. Like, that's the idea that they're not even hiding it. Now, the laughable premise on that is that, well, after the election, that'd be November, and mid-November is what? Oh, right, the middle of flu season.
Yeah.
Like that's the start and really the impetus of, so the worst possible time for people to be gathering is when it's going to be okay to gather because the election's over.
Yeah.
So it's all just electioneering. It's all just, trying to disfranchise people and trying to make people mad and all of those nonsense. And that's all happening, I believe, because Trump is president.
Yeah. Well, and when it comes to Trump, like he's a mixed bag. There is a lot that I hate about Trump. He's been pretty terrible about the Second Amendment. People may go, oh, well, you don't need bump stocks. Bump stocks aren't firearms. Who gives a shit? That is bad. That was a bad thing he did. He's continued. He's let the wars continue in Yemen, in Iraq, and in Afghanistan. These are bad things. But he's a mixed bag in that he, unlike Obama and Bush, hasn't started any new wars.
Correct.
He may not have brought, like I saw someone, I think it was either Gareth Porter or someone else who talked about how Obama technically took out more troops from Afghanistan or something.
But he also put more in, so
right.
That's a
right. And, but that's the thing. I see the good in less death, no matter what. And so insofar as there has been less war being made and created by Trump, that's a good thing. But honestly, the best thing about Trump is what you're talking about, is how he's made the masks drop of the corporate press, the media, and Hollywood, the academia. Have you ever read Lawrence Tribe's Twitter?
No, not recently, but I have.
You need to check this out because, several years ago, before social media, you'd hear of a Harvard law professor saying something and it would be erudite and it would be, oh, we listen to these people. But now you can read his Twitter feed and he's just as much of a jackass as everyone else on Twitter. And that's good for people to see.
Oh, the whole Brian Stetler thing on CNN, like watching the talking heads, watching the people from the bastions of the old press and the corporate and the cable news and all those people that were always so serious and so amazing. And you're like, no, they're just a bunch of petty dickholes. And seeing that happen, that has Trump's presidency, not Trump himself, not Trump's actions, Trump's presidency and the response to it has red-pilled more people than I can even imagine. And we'll go back to the beginning of before he was even elected. I mean, people were talking about impeaching him back before he was the nominee.
Yeah.
But remember the whole Access Hollywood tape?
Yes.
I had so many women pissed about that. Now, I talked to a lot of libertarian and more conservative people as well, but they were pissed about it, not because they were upset at Trump, but because they were upset at the press. Because at the time, one of the biggest books on the market and one of the biggest films on the market was 50 Shades of Grey.
Yeah.
And like, you mean to tell me in an era of every woman fantasizing about Christian Grey, who was Donald Trump 30 years ago, a seemingly attractive billionaire man who could do whatever he wants, he uttered the phrase, they let you grab him by the pussy, which is an absolute truism in the world he lives in. I live near Hollywood. You will not believe what women let celebrities do to be near celebrities. And people lost their minds. And I had women that were like, this is bullshit. Like, obviously, he lives in a different world. He lives in a completely different culture. He's a billionaire. He gets people to throw themselves at him on the premise of money and sycophants nonsense and all of those things. And it just the virtue of him running red-pilled people to the lies of the press. And it just steamrolled. And then you had the FISA courts and all of those things that happened where people woke up to what was happening. The FISA court thing, you're like, now people take Edward Snowden way more seriously, having watched what the FISA court did to Trump. Now that may help us with the MAGA bots, but the reality is that it's because he's president, because he's not just that magnanimous guy who's part of the military industrial complex who will shake your hand and then bomb your enemy for you, or help you take an oil field over or some nonsense. And to your point about less war and less death, nobody can argue with a straight face, honestly, that if Hillary Clinton had won the presidency, or if Jeb Bush had won the presidency, that we wouldn't be bombing Syria, that we wouldn't be in a straight-out war, if not proxy war with Iran, that we wouldn't be offering more than just support, but probably material boots on the ground in Yemen, and. I mean, Hillary Clinton was the architect of the Libya problem, 112 plus tomahawks, into that country.
Laughing at the knife rape of Gaddafi.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. That's who he was up against. And so there's no question that more people would have died, more suffering would have happened, more terrible. Now, that's a very low bar to set.
Yes.
But we're talking about the presidency. That's a very low bar to set. But that's still a good thing. It's still a net positive.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean I'm going to go rah, rah Trump. But when I look at the options and I go, okay, well, Joe Biden is that problem and Trump is less that. And Trump actually causes the corporate press to drop the mask, causes academia to drop. I mean, we watched this COVID thing happen. Again, I think a lot of the response to the COVID thing is political. I think it's especially in the blue states, it's very political, which is why you read the press and they're like, look at how great Cuomo was. You're like the guy who was telling you to go to ride the subway and go to Chinatown during the festivals back in February.
And threw COVID patients into nursing homes.
Yeah, and then through COVID patients into nursing homes, all that, like they extol that guy's virtues and then bemoan Trump because Trump didn't stop Cuomo from being Cuomo, and that right there causes people to be red pilled, causes people to wake up and pay more attention, and that for us, for liberty, for individual freedom, that's a net positive. That's a big win.
Yeah,
just by virtue of him being president. And so it's really hard for me to not want to. I mean, I'm not going to put a sign in my yard or anything else, but when I had to choose my vote, I'm like, well, shit. Voting for Joe Biden's a waste of time. Voting for Jo Jorgensen, I don't feel like gains me anything for liberty, but causing the mask to slip more? I mean, the idea that if Trump won the popular vote, not to try to persuade you, obviously, but the idea that if you won the popular vote and you took that electoral college argument away from the left, the idea that they read themselves into a coma for 4 more years, I mean, I don't know. That seems like it could have positive impulses. And I'm actually gotten to a point where I'm almost too charitable with Trump, and I admit that.
Yeah.
Like the bump stock ban. Absolutely tyrannical. I feel like he had no authority to do that, violates the Second Amendment. I'm on board with all of every gun rights and infringement. I get all of that. However, that was after Las Vegas, which was a major shooting.
Yeah.
He banned bump stocks, which, let's be honest, are pretty terrible devices. Okay. They're by and large, they lower your accuracy. They're fun toys.
It was a concession.
But it was a concession to something that I'm not saying I agree with it, but what happened after that? Nothing. Everyone shut the hell up. There was no major bills pushed through Congress. I mean, states did their thing. Like California, of course, banned a bunch of stuff because California is a one-party state under the socialists. But at the federal level, what else happened? Nothing. He banned something that was, I wish he hadn't, but it wasn't a big thing. And then it went away. Now, I feel like that ban should go away. I feel like the ATF should go away.
Yeah.
But I looked at that and I'm like, that felt a little too much out of the deal for me. Like, yeah, okay, I'm going to negotiate. I'm going to give them something so they feel like they won something that affects almost nobody. And then it's going to stop. And then it's going to go away. And then we'll move on to something else because people have the memories of goldfish. Then we're going to immediately position to something else. And then we'll go on to something else and that's it. So... And maybe that's just me giving way too much credit to it, but that's how I saw that. I'm like, wow, everyone shut the hell up. Remember Sandy Hook?
Yeah.
Remember how much federally they were trying to ban everything after that? Mm-hmm. Vegas was, I mean, it wasn't kids, but Vegas was way worse than that. And the bump stock thing was the issue. I mean, Congress, they were rewriting laws to allow gun manufacturers to be sued for firearm violence after Sandy Hook. I mean, it was way different.
Well, and I sometimes wonder if I'm too charitable towards Trump, but I'm not too charitable in so much as that way. Somewhat with the war and not making new ones, maybe a little too charitable, more than I should be. Maybe, but I don't know. But the reason I'm charitable is because the dude is a fucking sniper on Twitter. He's a troll. Mm-hmm. The fact is, I definitely see the utility of Trump's presidency because, for starters, he started out the gate by kneecapping the Bushes, by taking out a dynasty that everyone just assumed would continue. And then he followed that up in November by taking out the Clintons. These are both great things. And also, even though he's hilarious and has a very interestingly weird syntax that makes me laugh every time he talks, beyond that, a great amount of people, like you'll talk to conservatives, and if they're not just straight up Trump people, but they're Trump people, but they're not like the robot Trump people, they're like, well, he's not great, he doesn't do everything, he's kind of an idiot, but he's better than... But the fact is, more people than ever before are looking at a president and going, why do we give a buffoon like this the power to make war, the power to tax us, the power, etc.? So all of the red pills are great, and I cheer him for making those things happen. That's a white pill. I'm a white pill person because I have to, because my brain goes towards the black pill and I can't live there. But when it comes to me and with voting, it's not that I can't. I want to cheer when Trump does good. I want to cheer when the office of the presidency is demeaned to the point where it should be, because it's been overinflated for over 200 years. But I have to ask myself, when it comes to voting, when it comes to the deaths that will continue, like if Trump pulls out of Afghanistan, like I keep seeing reports that he's going to do, if he pardons Edward Snowden, Julian Assange, especially Ross Ulbricht, I'll vote for that motherfucker in a second. I don't care. I want him to know, you did good. Here's a treat. You did good. But as of this moment, I can't square the circle of, do the ends justify the means? Do I want to take part of this?
So that's the thing. Is like I look at it as different means or different ends. Because for me, yes, if you were to, I'm not saying I would vote for Trump. I have not even decided this yet, but this is just me from an argument of a standpoint. If I vote for Trump and his camp take that as a win for Trump, as a mandate for Trump to do whatever he wants. And that has some dangerous implications, obviously, for anybody in presidency. But for me, it's more of a middle finger to the Marxists and the left who have lost their minds and lost all sense of decency and human dignity over the last 4 years.
That's why I voted for Trump.
Yeah, and that right there is the ends to me. Like, I know that whoever wins is gonna, even if they win by one vote, is gonna take it as a mandate to do whatever they want. And the opposite side of that is that if Biden wins, the Republican Party becomes the milquetoast, boilerplate, Mitt Romney nonsense that they have been for at least 4 years, and then we'll see who they run in 4 years. But if Trump wins, the left loses its mind more and descends further into chaos, and the neocons lose more favor in the Republican circles. And that, I don't know, that the ends there may justify the means. I haven't decided yet. I'm trying to look at things both counterintuitively, and not like I don't give Trump credit for a lot of things, but like with like the whole 4D chess and all that horse shit.
Yeah, that's horse shit.
But I'll give you an example of like the Chinese tariffs. I was absolutely in favor of them, and because I actually approve of tariffs in one capacity. I live in California. I live in the U.S. We are very regulated. We have an EPA, FDA, and. You can't start a business without some county commissioner up your ass for 6 months. You think it's going to cost you $100,000 to build a business? You better have $300,000 in 6 months to spare. I mean, that's legitimately, it takes forever to open a coffee shop out here. It's so retarded. So the issue is that we kneecap our own entrepreneurial spirit. We kneecap our own businesses. We kneecap our own ability to produce things. All of those issues. And then we outsource it to basically a glorified third world country who uses barely above slave labor, if not slave labor, who pollutes. Like, we care about the EPA. Don't mind all the sludge we're dumping into the Chinese rivers. Like, China has 7 of the 10 most polluted cities in the world now. I mean, all these things that we do by virtue of having the ability to just offshore everything and just destroy someone else's environment. And a tariff is a way to make people pay the actual cost for the legislation they believe in. Oh, you believe in a minimum wage? Well, we're going to look at how much they're charging for labor, and then we're going to add a tariff to compensate for what it would cost if we hired American workers. If you believe that's a living wage, or, adjust it for inflation or different markets or what have you. I mean, there are arguments for that. But we're going to add the environmental cost that you laid on American businesses. We're going to add that cost to the cost of the product that comes out of China, and do those sort of things to make people realize what they're actually voting for, what they're actually supporting, what they're actually kneecapping. Oh, you actually want solar panels? Well, now you have to buy them at what it costs to make them in the US, and not the Chinese government subsidized versions that you're buying right now. I mean, those sort of things make sense to me. Mm-hmm. Now, people are like, oh, it's anti-free market. We don't have a free market. The world doesn't have a free market. China literally owns most of the companies, or the CCP owns most of the companies that are in China, or they have a heavy hand in it. They control, their censors control what movies go in there. all of that stuff. And so there has to be a way to push back on that, just from the perspective of, we believe in these things here. We demand these things here. So if we're going to demand those things, we should demand those things in our market, not just in the people who participate in the market in this one area. And that's where I'm anti-open borders for very much the same reason, because we don't live in a world where things are equal. I know the Libertarian Party likes to say, like, what's the fucking quote that they say? We'll settle for nothing less than a world set free in our lifetimes. Like, get the hell out of here. You can't set a local city council free. You're going to set China free. You're going to set, South Africa free, all these other places. You're going to solve all of these worldwide problems. Get the hell out of here.
What a strange idea anyway when it comes to libertarianism, because libertarianism is not globalism. It's individualism.
No.
But let me ask, the tariffs, the way you're talking about them, you are more interested in having the people of America feel the weight of them, or the Chinese Communist Party?
I don't care about the Chinese Communist Party. That's the problem for China. I want, for the most part, unless they try to fight with us, I want the American people who vote for the regulatory system and the regulatory burdens that they claim to want. I want them to feel the weight of those regulatory burdens. I don't think you should be able to force me to pay $15 an hour to an employee, and then you get to go buy it from a company in China that's paying $2 an hour, because now you're making it where I literally can't compete.
Do you think that works out, though? Do you think that that people feel the pain and they go, oh, it's our regulations that are the issue?
No. You have to make the case on it. Absolutely. I mean, the person who inflicts the tariffs has to say that directly, like, this is why we're doing it, because you have to make that case. But I do know that monetarily it does cause problems. I knew a guy many years ago who was a toy importer. He used to import toys in from Japan, various other places. He was big in like the anime licenses before anime really became as popular as it is now. Yeah. It was still a very, very subset of a subset. You'd only find anime stuff in comic shops, and now it's Little Tokyo, and now it's everywhere.
Sadly.
And he imported toys, and this is back when Walmart was to just become the largest toy seller in America. And he had this toy set, and it was like, I want to say it cost like $9 to make. Like, that's how much it cost to make in like Japan or Korea or wherever he was making it. And he went to Walmart, and they were like, absolutely, we love that, we want to sell it, but we're going to sell it for $9.99. Like, we'll buy them from you, but we're going to sell them for $9.99. He's like, but it cost me $9 to make them. Like, I can't do that. Like, if you're going to sell it for $9.99, that means you're going to buy it for me for how much? And they're like $4, $5. So now his only choice was to then take that product, make it in China, and drop the labor costs, drop the environmental regulations, go somewhere where he could avoid all of those things, all of those added costs, in order to sell it, because that's what the market demanded. Walmart knew their customers. Their customers were not going to pay more than $10 for this thing. And because they knew they could get it for $10. Now, if you take that out of the equation, you take that option out, like, well, I want this for $10. Cool story. We can make it for $10, but you have to get rid of this labor law. You have to get rid of this environmental law. These are the reasons. And I'm not saying I want more government, but if I was going to do tariffs on things, I would do it like packaging. Like, again, it's using government to wake people up to government. Like, if the government's going to allow regulation or allow these things, which I'm against, don't get me wrong, I want all that stuff to go away, but it exists. So I'm looking at the system as it exists. I want it labeled like our food packages. I want to be like, environmental regulations, 15%, labor laws, this, OSHA, this much, all these things. So when you pick up a product, you're like, why is this not $10? And you're like, oh, that's why. Maybe that's a little pipe dreamy, on the far end of it.
It sounds like you should buy a little machine that makes stickers and start doing that.
Start doing that on all the different things. But the problem is it doesn't work, though, because those costs don't exist. Like, you'd have to figure out what it would cost if it was made in the US, and then do all the math and all that. But those costs don't impact us. Nobody realizes that. Nobody sees it. And I think that's the thing. It's like in California, we have some of the highest gas taxes in the US.
Oh yeah,
because of many, many regulatory reasons.
How much is your gas right now?
Last I don't know. I think it's like between $3.50 and $4 a gallon.
Ridiculous. Ours is under $2.
So, yeah, it'll go back up to about Usually, well, this year's been different because of the whole lockdown and nobody's going anywhere. Usually around summer, it's between $4.50 and $5. Yeah. So, and that's oftentimes basic.
I remember when it was like that after 2008, when they had the horrible gas crisis or whatever it was, and it would cost me $80-something to fill up my tank every week to drive to work, where I barely made more than that.
Yeah.
But I had to work. I had to have the money.
But that's the thing, is that people don't know where that money goes, though, and that's the other problem. Is like with the gas taxes, we have a sticker on every gas pump, but it's like it's not on the gas pump. It's actually up. Like, so if you're looking at the gas pump where you pull the handle off, it's like it's up on the side around the corner, and you have to like look for it to find out how much you're paying per gallon in taxes, and nobody knows where that goes because we're so. Like, well, not only are we just inert in the system, but we're so ignorant of the system that we don't know what costs, why things cost the way they cost, why things are able to be the way they are. And so when libertarians argue against tariffs, they're arguing it from this false free market perspective where it's the robber baron problem to a point where it's like Standard Oil they'd go into an area and they'd depress the cost of gasoline so the competition couldn't afford to stay in business, and then they'd buy that gas station out and raise the prices back up. It's that sort of market manipulation, and wholesale countries do that.
Yeah.
And we do it as well to a point, obviously. I mean, Boeing versus Airbus and all the subsidies we give and all that crap. But you have to make people aware of it if you ever want it to go away. And so when I saw that, I'm like, well, I get why people argue against that with him, but I can see a positive. Yeah. I can see a net positive on that.
Yeah, I think that really what you're arguing for is education with a squeeze. People need to feel it. And
forced education. Any government action should require people to feel what that government action is.
And yeah, I mean, I don't love tariffs. Part of it is because, you end up paying for that. I don't want to end up paying more for things. I mean, I'd much rather us have better practices. But I mean, I'm never going, like, that's me. I come to libertarianism, the non-aggression principle, all of that from a state of morality, not a state of pragmatism.
No, I get that.
No, I'm just, what I'm saying is I am never going to have a conversation about the deficit or the $220 trillion in unfunded liabilities. I'm never going to have those number conversations or necessarily talk about how they're putting our grandchildren in debt. That doesn't interest me. And so when it comes to these issues, I'm against tariffs because I don't, it directly affects me. It directly affects like the Green New Deal. I can talk all day about how that hurts the poor more than anyone else. Like I've talked to people about with taxes on cigarettes to make people smoke less. Do you know what hardcore smokers do when the prices of their cigarettes go up? Do they stop smoking cigarettes? No,
they stop buying necessities.
Yeah. And so like that is usually where my arguments go to. And so some of the higher mathematical ideas, economic ideas of libertarianism, though very important, aren't typically my shtick, just because I think it's boring. But I understand the idea of putting a squeeze on people to force them to do what they say they want.
Yes, but that squeeze is also from a moral standpoint too, because libertarians are very good at talking about the war on Yemen and talking about the genocide that's happening there, and they're very good at talking about I don't have a problem with private prisons as much as I have a problem with how they're run in a police state system. But they'll talk about the private prisons using basically slave labor because they're paying them pennies on the dollar for the work they're doing. And libertarians are very good at talking about those things and very good at ignoring the Uyghurs in China that are being forced to do slave labor, or the people that they just bring in when they built the giant bird's nest for the Olympics. They just took over this whole area and made these people essentially slave laborers and then pushed them out in the fields. And they're very good at ignoring those things so we can have cheaper products here in the US under this faux premise of this. I understand the Friedman thing and all that, where it's like the cost of living here is different than the cost of living in Indonesia. So you could pay somebody way less there and have the same, sort of equity across the board. Like it costs me a lot more to live where I live than it costs you where you live. And so cost of livings are different and you adjust that. But we don't even have those conversations. We're like, we want a cost of living of a certain level in the US. And obviously we baseline it with stupidity like Fight for 15, but we want this basic standard of living in the US. And then we're like, oh, and by the way, we have no problem if people are literally enslaved to give us what we want elsewhere. And tariffs, the reason I support tariffs, honestly, is because they were one of the best weapons utilized to end the international slave trade. The British East India Company controlled over, I think it was 80% or more of the international trade at the time in the world, using essentially the British Navy. It was the British Navy and the British East India Company. And they utilized that power and the power of tariffs and the power of economic warfare to stop countries from literally enslaving people, to help end chattel slavery in a lot of areas. And it was used for a net good. I mean, anybody who argues that that's not a net good is just bonkers. Like, it was used for a net good. They're like, but tariffs are evil. Yeah, but they were also were utilized to, not that they weren't the only thing, but they were utilized to help end slavery. Trade deals can be used for those things. And I think that is an important thing we need to look at when you're looking at very complex, very problematic situations with nation states and what have you. Because we talked about earlier in the group we were in how I'm sort of a minarchist. Now, at heart, I'm an anarchist. From a practical standpoint, I just don't see the utility of it, because it's the idea of the government will cease to exist and we'll all get along because the non-aggression principle. And you're like, what about cartels? It's like, oh, well, we legalize drugs and prostitution. That would be a problem. Cartels literally kidnap people for money. They literally, part of their business model is to violate they kidnap women and sell them into sex slavery. That's not prostitution. They don't want to pay them. They violate the NAP to make money. Unless you're going to go to war with them, that's a problem we have to look at. And it's a very complex, very intricate system. And I'd rather see libertarians look at things, or anarchists, what have you, look at things on the actual practical worldview. I actually like the agorist mindset of people who just check out. I don't care about politics. I'm going to take care of my family, take care of what's good for me and everything. I just happen to live in Southern California. It's not realistic. There's nowhere I can go locally where that's a possibility. And
just so you know, those are the worst anarchists. Anyone who pretends that Ancapistan will not have problems is out of their damn mind. I think one of my favorite arguments, though, is when people argue against the concept of anarchy, is when they go, oh, well, if there's anarchy, then there will be regional warlords who do this, that, and the other. And they make all these arguments from, oh, well, if there's anarchy, it'll be the status quo. People will be shot in the streets. They're not now.
Yeah, but if my wife goes to work and has 2 clients, the state will throw her into a government-sanctioned rape cage. It's this idea that violence, that you think the Democrats and Republicans aren't waging sectarian violence on each other for their various religions. I mean, I don't have that argument. I just hate the anarchists that look at it like, and Capistan will be amazing.
Yeah,
everything will be awesome.
I agree with you. Those people are idiots. But that's why I am more along the lines of the agorist argument of things. I know one of the things I say a lot is the only person who can make you free is you. That's it. As Malice has said in the past, you can't spend yourself rich, you can't vote yourself free. This is true. You can't vote. They're never going to hold a vote to be like, hey, do you want to not do this state thing anymore? They're not going to do that. But my job is to take care of my wife and my 4 soon-to-be 5 children. My job is to make a future for them. My job is to do everything in my ability to eliminate the government from my life. I think that one of the most interesting takes I've heard in recent days actually came from Mencius Moldbug. Do you know Mencius Moldbug or Curtis Yarvin?
I listened to him, I think it was with... on Man Beyond the Wall, I think, was what I heard him recently.
What he kind of talked about is how it's more or less the agorist idea, but he was saying that the best way to live in the world we live in this, with the states we live in, with how things are run, is to live in America and act like you're an expat. Follow the laws you want to follow. Keep your nose down. Don't get in trouble. But do what you can to live the life you want to live.
Yeah, I think that's the hardest part about it's also sort of a gray man mentality. The hardest part about that is it's very different in different areas.
Oh yeah.
Like it's very easy to say that in certain parts of the country and very, very impossible or seemingly impossible in other areas. And that's where it gets really hard, because I look at, like, I want to get out of where I live. I want to leave California. Like every rational Californian wants to leave here. Unfortunately, we can't just split off the crazies and keep the good part of the state. But, you know, unfortunately, that's not going to happen. But I look at it and go, I can't survive. My wife can't go to work. You can't do this. You can't do that. I mean, it's really infuriating. And there's only so many laws you can avoid before, you know, they really just...
They throw you in a rape cage.
Throw you in a government-sanctioned rape cage.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. I agree with you. And I think that that's part of the concept, is to move where you have more freedom and can ignore more and can do more. And there are a lot of people who are doing that. I'm not going to be building a full-on farm. That's not me. That's not what I want. But I am actively working to find ways where I can be freer, where I can spend less money on taxes. Because let me tell you, being self-employed, this is the first year I went ahead, and I don't know anything about this crap. I've never done taxes self-employed except for at the end of last year. And it worked out. I had a W-2. It was kind of easy. But this is the first full year of it. And I'm looking, I didn't know that I could, you know, pay estimated payments throughout the year and, you know, kind of actually plan as I was going. I just was saving money, and then coronavirus happened, different things happened, and that money's gone. And so now I'm stuck saving $600 every time I get a paycheck, in hopes that I can make enough money or save enough money so that in April I'm able to pay the estimated taxes that they're telling me I have to pay. And I think, honestly, what I want more than anything is for everyone to have to start taking their taxes out of their bank and saving them or sending them to the government in a check. That's what I want to see, because that's, I mean, looking at your first paycheck and seeing FICA taking all your money is an experience that we've all had, where we're like, who the fuck is FICA? But
and SSDI and everything else. And I think not only that, I would actually advocate for that, where the government will not, it's not a bank, it will not withhold your money for you. You have to hold it yourself. And then you have to, when you pay your taxes, you pay them on April. There's no extensions. You pay them by April 15th. That's it. And then the election is 2 days later. We vote on who we want to represent us 2 days after we all have to pay our taxes, and we all have to withdraw thousands of dollars from our bank account to send it to these jackals. I mean, that I think is the ideal way to really wake people up to all of that. I think one of the things, I mean, going back way early to what we're talking about the anarch versus minarchist thing, I think one of the things that really frustrates me about having these conversations is that, not between you and I, because I agree, but it's this issue of most people can't have these conversations.
Oh yeah, nuance is not a thing in most people's minds.
They're like, you're going to use the government? You actually vote? I'm like, yeah, dude, my action, my literal action and my voting saved me like $300 on my property taxes next year. And the year after that, and the year after that, because it's a 30-year thing. So that means, 30 years times $300 per year, that saved me a lot of money by pushing back on that. So yeah, I voted. No, I'm not trying to oversell my involvement in that. I ran the social media for that campaign. Mm-hmm. There were 3 or 4 of us that killed those ballot measures. If we hadn't done that, everyone in my community, in a town of 140,000 people, every person, renters, everybody would have lost a lot of money for a very long time. And then you'll run into ANCAPs like, you're voting. And I'm like, yeah, obviously, defensively, obviously. And we can talk about these things. We can talk about the utility of why it works and how it doesn't, and come up with better tactics. And if you want to be an agorist and you want to build your own sustainable lifestyle, I have no problem with that. That's a great thing. You can reach people. We can talk about that, and you can get more people involved in being able to do that, which is great. And I can talk to people in the political sphere, and I can talk to them and try to get people out of that, and try to talk about how we can make things more free, and how this oppressive government really is screwing everybody, and maybe wake those people up. And then, hey, we're one step closer to liberty, because we're all working at different angles. That's also that thing, like, the Scott Horton attack from the left, the right from the right. And so many anarchists and libertarians and minarchists even don't see that. We're like, yeah, you're doing your thing, I'm doing my thing, and we're all trying to get people here to believe in things like the non-aggression principle and basic morality.
Well, yeah, and that's I had a conversation with someone last night who was asking me why, not why I wouldn't vote for president, but why I wouldn't join the Libertarian Party because I want to see it destroyed. And I was like, yes, I would love to see someone do that, but that's not me. And it's like, why wouldn't it be you? And I had another conversation like a couple months ago with a very conservative guy who asked me why I wasn't running for office. And it's like, that's one of those things for me is I think that people who were in the Libertyverse, because I abhor the phrase liberty movement now because it died in 2012, and anyone who tries to co-opt it from this point is usually just really shitty at it, and I don't need it because that's Ron Paul, man. But I think people within the Libertyverse need to understand how to communicate. We need to understand how to communicate with each other. For one, yes, I will be hard on the left, and I will be hard on the right for their beliefs and what they do, what they vote for, what they say. I'll always be hard on them for that. However, okay, I'm a Christian. One of the things in Christianity, in the Bible, it talks about how you don't judge the world for the standard that Christians have, right? Mm-hmm. So you aren't a Christian, so I don't expect you to live to the same moral standard that I have. You have a different moral standard, and that's fine. But if you were a Christian and you were doing something that went against the Christian moral standard, I would mention that to you. I would be a little bit harder on you. And so I don't understand people who say, why are you so hard on other libertarians? Because the libertarians that are leading the conversations that I'm being hard on online are the ones who need rough correction. Call it tough love, if you will. But I'm going to be more openly, I won't say hostile, I will troll, but I will be more open about the Libertarian Party's faults, of Nicholas Sarwark's faults, of all of these other faults, because that is someone not living up to the philosophy. And I'm not talking about you're not a real libertarian. I'm saying there are basic things here that we agree on, and you're dragging in progressivism. What the fuck?
So two things. One, I do have friends who are working on trying to start a more cultural side of libertarianism, and they have called it the Liberty Movement. So I will put that, give them that message of yours on that, on the Libertyverse. And then if I don't push back on that and say something, I'm going to get yelled at. So I have to say that. And then the other part is, you're right. I take it to the argument that I've had for a long time about government accountability. Mm-hmm. The people, it's the issue that you're running into with the state. So if you get pulled over by an officer for X, doesn't matter what X is. If you broke the law, you're expected to have known the law, right?
Yes.
If you don't know that X was illegal, it doesn't matter. Ignorance of the law is no excuse. But the way the system is set up is that if the officer doesn't know that X is legal and arrests you, ignorance of the law is an excuse. The people that are supposed to know and enforce the laws aren't required to know and enforce it, but the people who don't know it are required to know it. It's a completely backward system. So I've argued for a long time that we need to fix that, but also we need to fix the problem where the people who are in the system, the people who swore an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution, have a stronger penalty, or should have a stronger penalty than those who didn't. If you say, I believe in X, like Christianity, for example, and you don't uphold the virtues of Christianity, obviously a Christian has more reason to come after you than to come after me, because I'm basically agnostic. I don't subscribe to any faith, but I also don't tear apart them either. I was never a 12-year-old atheist, so I had no reason to go that direction. But I'm basically agnostic, and I've been to synagogues and churches, and I can be respectful of whatever people want because I like human beings that are decent human beings.
Yeah.
But it's that argument when libertarians stand up and they say, I'm a libertarian. Now, if you're just a person at an event or just a person at something, it doesn't matter. But when you stand up and say, I'm a libertarian, I believe in the non-aggression principle, I believe in these things, and then you don't actually put those messages forward and you don't actually fight for liberty and individual freedom, then not only are you doing a disservice to it, by telling people the wrong things, by tarnishing the brand, by tarnishing the name, you're making my job harder. Yeah. You're making your job harder. You're making it harder for people to understand that libertarianism isn't just, progressivism with a lower tax code. Yeah. It's the left libertarians always like to talk about how, the Libertarian Party is just a bunch of Klan members who take their hoods off to smoke pot. Whereas the left libertarians are just Marxists who want to pay less in taxes. It's that thing where I don't even know what they want, to be honest, because they are just Marxists. There almost is no other side of it. But it does everyone a disservice. So obviously, I've done videos about the Libertarian Party, about Spike Cohen. I've gone after them for certain things because obviously I disagree with Trump. I mean, I was polite to him earlier for rhetorical reasons, obviously. But obviously, I'm going to disagree with Trump. And obviously, I'm going to disagree with Biden. But if I was going to spend my time trying to educate Democrats or MAGA bots to vote, like I'm going to argue with the vote blue no matter who. Have you ever gone on to like a Kamala Harris tweet and tried to cock with somebody? It's a waste of time. It's all bots on both sides.
Sounds like hell.
But in theory, I can go onto a Spike Cohen or Jo Jorgensen thing, and there are people who are not so inured in the partisanship in the system that you may be able to reach them. You may be able to go, oh, okay, yeah, well, why did you get people to vote against Jo Jorgensen? Or why did you this? Or why do you believe that? And if you have honesty and integrity behind it, people will listen and they will follow. And maybe if we attack enough of these CIA plants and attack enough of these people who can't, chop down saplings, then perhaps then we can, I'm making a Sarwalk joke for those who don't know, perhaps we can push liberty in a better direction. We can push people more towards talking about the Fed, talking about anti-war, talking about the non-aggression principle, talking about those things that we're all supposed to care so much about, as opposed to talking about who we're going to bend the knee for next. Yeah. So yeah, obviously.
Yeah, and so I mean that's my stance, is because I hear people make that argument. I heard it in that Andy Craig quote unquote debate with Dave Smith. He was like, "Why are you harder on libertarians than you are on Nick Fuentes or Kamala Harris or whoever?" And I'm like, well, when Kamala Harris opens her mouth, when Nick Fuentes opens his mouth, when Ben Shapiro, name your poison on the right or the left, when they open their mouth, they don't represent my philosophy that I have claimed. So yeah, I'm going to push back at them, but I'm going to push back a lot harder and with a little bit more gusto to the people who are claiming to represent me.
Yeah, I would actually go one further than that, because when I push back against libertarians, I push back against people who, you're right, claim to believe in the same ethos that I believe in. Yeah, the same core concepts. But we're also supposed to be on the same page. So when I can point out how we're not on the same page, it's supposed to matter more. But when I sit across from somebody who's vote blue no matter who, or, keep America great or whatever, you sit across from them, you're already in hostile territory. When you walk into an area that's already hostile, you don't walk in and start kicking over trash cans. You walk in and you look around and you go, okay, let me get my bearings. Let me see what's going on. Let me try to broach this. I like anecdotes, so I'll use one really quick. Back in 2003, the anti-war protests that kicked off against George W. Bush, because we can always have war protests against Republicans, but the anti-war left just disappears under the left. All the protests are going off, and I hate protesters. I've been to a couple protests. I went to some anti-lockdown protesters, but I by and large hate protesters because everybody gets together and it's the lowest common denominator. You take the lowest IQ person in the protest and you divide their IQ by the number of people there, and that's the average IQ. Yes. So it's just absolutely ridiculous. And so I went because I knew it was going to be a clown show. I mean, you had people there. It's like supposed to be an anti-war protest, but you got people there for like free Mumia Abu Jamal, and you've got all these people who are out there doing performative art. And I just wanted to have fun, so I had a sign made that had a mushroom cloud in the background, and it said, "Iraq today, North Korea tomorrow, Berkeley by Thursday." And it was affixed to a baseball bat. LAPD took my bat from me because they were worried I was going to get beaten to death with it. And I went through this protest, and this dude walked up to me and he started screaming at me. He's like, you're wrong, you're terrible, and you need to read this book, blah, blah. And this is back in 2003. So I had a Palm Pilot, a handspring visor, actually. And I pulled it out, and I'm like, what's the name of the book? And he's like, huh? And I'm like, what's the name? You want me to read this? What's the name of the book? And I wrote it down, and then he yelled at me for a few minutes, and he fucked off. And then I followed the procession all the way down, and I was at, all the celebrities. I kind of got around the gates at the backstage area and held my sign up in front of all the celebrities, which triggered all of them. And then the same dude found me later, and he walked up with his throng of people, and he looked biker-ish, like pretty big guy in a big group of people all wearing leather. And he walked up to me and he stopped and he put his hand down and he apologized for being a dickhead because I was willing to talk to him, willing to have the conversation. Now, obviously I was there to troll him and trigger, and I've explained what my purpose was. And we left on amicable terms, but I was in hostile territory. I knew I had to, even though I had this sort of, contentious trolling point, when he came up to me, I couldn't just yell at him. I had to take it very calm, very, very respectful, and try to understand what he was saying in order to diffuse the situation. That's sort of the hostage negotiation situation I go into when I argue or talk to somebody from the left or the right, because I want to see where we have common ground and how I can get them out of the inert position that they're in. Whereas if somebody already agrees with me, I can dispense with all of that.
Yeah.
All of that just goes away because, no, dude, you said you've read Rothbard, you've read Spooner, you believe in all these things, and you're not acting like it. So let's go. Now we're going to box it out because this is ridiculous. And I don't know how so many people in the Libertyverse, the Liberty movement, how they don't understand that premise of, obviously I'm going to have a different conversation with Kamala Harris. I mean, if it's a good faith conversation, but with Nick Fuentes or whoever, then I'm going to have with Sarwak. I called Sarwak out at the convention in Orlando and his aunt because he claimed he wasn't going to chair the convention, so he abdicated his duties. And his response to me said, "Why are you here?" And his response to me was, "Fuck you, that's why." Well, congratulations, gloves are off. Now we're going to yell at each other because that's a different situation than if I'm talking to somebody, who doesn't understand the basic ethos of what we're supposed to believe in.
Yeah, and that's I do believe there are different people lack nuance. People can't have, like, an anarchist and a minarchist typically can't sit in a place too long without arguing about something and it getting heated, at least online. I think it's probably very different in person, unless you're a Sarwark follower, obviously, or Sarwark himself. But
Vegetarians.
But it's like, I talk about different things based on who I'm talking to. If I'm talking to someone on the left, I'm not going to talk to them about the same things as I'm going to talk to someone who's a Trump supporter. And I'm probably going to use honey rather than vinegar for those people.
But even beyond that, it's this thing that the fakertarian crowds, the anti-Craigs of the world, don't understand, is that the real world is not online. And if you approach online the way you approach the real world, you'll live a much better life than you have approached the real world the way these idiots approach online.
Yeah.
Because I had this moment where I don't remember even what the tweet was, but I tweeted back to Michael about something about Michael Malice and how, it was about Freedom Fest. And I was like, hey, I would actually go to Freedom Fest to get a drink with Michael Malice. And he retweeted me and he said, it's like, I couldn't get a drink with you because you would drink mine. You're so thirsty. And I was like, son of a bitch. Like, I wasn't going to delete the tweet or anything else. I'm like, he just like that. And the thing is, I looked at that and went, God damn it. That is something I would say to a friend of mine. Like, that is like the snarky nonsense. Like, that is the bullshit response I would take. And I couldn't get offended because I'm like, yeah, if the roles were reversed, I probably would have said something like that. And I couldn't get mad and I couldn't get defensive. And I'm like, okay, fuck. And I moved on with my day, being owned by Michael Malice. And it was like, but at the same time, okay, that's fair. But the thing is, the reason I bring that up is that I looked at that not as somebody was mean to me on the internet and I need to yell at them. It was like, shit, this guy just basically trolled me the way I would troll my best friend.
Right.
Like, okay, fair enough.
You've known me a good bit. Talking to me face to face, am I different than I am online?
No.
I've talked to people, over the course of this, and there have been different people. I won't name names, but there were a couple of people that I talked to online and thought, wow, these people are pretty sharp and good online. And then I listened to a podcast and I was like, this is the driest shit I've ever listened to in my life. How are these people the way they are on Twitter, but are this boring on their podcast? But I will say, let me share my most recent Malice thing. I am followed by Michael Malice on Twitter.
Lucky.
But
I'm such a nerd that I feel like that. Like I'm losing out in that moment. I'm like, oh.
But he's retweeted me a fair amount. But the gold standard Michael Malice interactions on Twitter is if you make him GLOL, which is GLOL, genuinely laugh out loud.
I got one of those.
Those are the best, because the other day he had said something about he'd retweeted Biden saying that he wasn't going to lift the president's tweet, and I was like, I just replied to Malice, well, Biden has 77 million less followers than Trump. How is he going to lift anything? And of course, in my mind, this is also mentioning the fact that the corporate press constantly plays his tweets and goes over everything that he says. Like, I find it hard to believe you could lift a Trump tweet. But Malice responded, "Do you not believe in Venn diagrams?" And I responded, "Venn diagrams are a spook." And I got a GLOL. And that is my favorite. I think it's my second GLOL, but that's my favorite.
Okay. So mine. So I'll nerd out for a minute. Mine was Malice was in a conversation that Nick Sarwark was involved in, and I jumped into it, and I was arguing with Sarwark over a couple things, and we started talking about principle, and I said, the principle is supposed to matter, and Sarwark said a nerd nonsense about how the party we care about growing the party, and Malice retweeted me with the screen grab of the Libertarian Party's website that said the party of principle in a response to Sarwark on that, with the whole thing with the glow. And I was like, yes, I got my good retweet. I got my good retweet, but then he bitch slapped me with the other one because, all that.
Well,
but again, it's like I've had to talk about like what you're talking about with sounding the same as you do online as in person. I've had people who have read, and not even like long protracted things that I've written, but like short little things like comments. I've had people text me, be like, how did I read that comment in your voice? Like, yeah. I saw like with the way you wrote that, I knew what emphasis on what syllable you were going to use. And it's that thing where people, I think we want people to respect that, and we want people to be able to be like, hey, who are you as a human being? And a lot of the fakertarian dudes, the Andy Craig types, they don't have the empathy or the ability to realize that you would never do this outside the real world. Like out in the real world, you would never approach people this way. And even this is where it's getting really interesting to me, at least. The world of Zoom and podcasting always existed, but Zoom sort of broke it open. The COVID thing really broke open this sort of communication style we're doing now in a much more populist way. Yeah. And people treat this the way they treat the internet, not the way they treat normal human interaction.
Really?
And I that's from at least what I've seen. And I feel like that's a disservice to humanity, because it's, again, the problem of, well, you only say that because you've never been punched in the face. You've never been in a situation where you had to hold your tongue. You've never been in a situation where saying that would absolutely cause repercussions or problems. And so, or how you say that would actually cause all hell to break loose. So you've never been in that situation, which is why you feel free to do this. And the people who grew up with that sort of Twitter mentality, that sort of, Facebook world that they can say whatever they want. Yeah. With this facelessness, that now they have transitioned into this online Zoomy world where they still do that. And I think it's going to cause a severe breakdown, because when you see reactions and micro expressions and how people respond and all the things of human interaction, it really changes. It really does differentiate. Like at the Orlando convention, I had people walk up to me, and the way they are online versus the way they are in person is completely different, because they're not used to a human being pushing back against them. They're used to a new message, and then they run to Google and research their thing, and then they argue back, and then they do something else and they argue back, and they drop into their secret group and find a friend to give them facts and memes, and then they argue back. Whereas in real life, you're like, no, you're wrong, and here's 6 reasons why, and they go, and they actually push back, and you show that real humanity exists. And these people, they just can't do that.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting, and I think that's the problem we run into. That's what I saw. At least that's what I took out of the Dave Smith versus Andy Craig conversation, if we can call it that, on Alliance of Liberty, because Dave seems like a normal dude.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like if I was walking down the street and I saw Dave Smith, he'd be the same Dave Smith there as the Dave Smith that I've heard talking to Michael Malice. I feel the same way about Malice. Like, they're the same dude no matter where they are. But these other people are just, it's a mask they put on. It's a personality that they affect. It's that whether you're a jock or somebody in the LGBTQ whatever community, where that's your whole personality. These are the people, the most libertarian people who ever libertied in liberty's stake. That's what they believe of themselves, and that's the persona they put forward, which is why they get so mad of like, why didn't you push back against this, and why didn't you do that? I'm like, oh, that's because I'm a human being with empathy, and I understand how communication skills work. That's why. That's why. Also, I don't want to get punched in the face.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned identity, though, because I have said this for years. I do think that, at least my generation, but I think it goes beyond that, there is a profound lack of identity in people. And so people that are in the pragmatist caucus in the Libertarian Party, the people who are balls to the wall on Twitter but are boring or whatever outside in their podcast, in regular conversation, I think that a lot of that has to do with that lack of identity, because they need to have that. Like, I think that when it comes to some of these people in the Libertarian Party, these are low status people. Like, I think Dave said this, or Malice might have said it, or Tom Woods, but these are low status people who are getting the smallest amount of power, the smallest amount of status, and that's what's keeping them going.
I think, yes, but I think it's more than that they're low status, because if you were to look at a CV and credentialing and all those things, that's a different thing. I, as a human being, am a low status human being. I am, borderline poverty, for a long time, sort of thing. Like, I am lower middle class at best, not at the peak of my life. And so I live in that low status, no credentialing. I'm not allowed within eyeshot of the ivory tower. And yet the difference is I don't let that define me.
Yeah.
It's people that are both low status and have no self-worth
and no identity.
And no identity. And that's the problem, because they look at that world and they want to be part of it. And that's how they think they'll get status. And that status is their identity, is their personality. And you see this in everything. I saw this in youth organizations and fraternal organizations. You'd see people that all they cared about was the titles and the awards and the medals and all of that crap. And that's how it's the Al Bundy thing. 40 years later, and it's still, and I scored 4 touchdowns in one game. Like, dude, yeah, I get that, but that was a long time ago. Like, who are you now? And you don't have to be, a CV chasing person. You can just be somebody who's like, yeah, I just am a human being who likes other human beings, or I care about this, or I'm that. Like, when you ask somebody, how do you identify yourself? Like, who are you? People ask me that, and I'm like, I don't have an answer. There was an article at the local college when this whole lawsuit that was started, really kicked off in my town, where my city's suing me. And the local college interviewed me, and she was like, well, how do you define yourself? Do you consider yourself a journalist? She asked all these questions. I just sat there, and I was like, I don't. Like, I don't define myself in almost any way. Like, I've got different facets. I mean, if people can't see, but like, I've got a taxation is death flag behind me, and I got a Lego poster and alcohol posters, and there's Me Seeks and Atlas Shrugged and Spider from Transatlantic, all this random stuff. Like, I'm a part comic book nerd. I'm also like to read. I also like this. I went huge into movies, all those things. And those are all part of what define me. So if I were in the liberty verse, the liberty movement, or the Libertarian Party or whatever, that's not who I am. That would just be a part of my life. And those low status, low T people who have no self-identity, that's how they define their entire existence. And that's the hard part to get past. And again, you see that everywhere. You see that in the gay community with the people who, like, it's not that you just like, it's not that you just know that they're gay. You with these dudes and you're like, why is that your whole personality? Or the jocks, the water wax. I was water polo wax when I was in high school. It's like, those guys, that's their entire personality. Cool. You scored 4 touchdowns in a game. Okay, what else you got? And we just happen to see that a lot in the Libertarian Party, in the Libertarian world, because the Libertarian world also, I believe, is so small that those people can rise up to the top. It's the big fish in the small pond. They're not even big fish in this pond, but they think they are, and they want to rise up, which is also, I think, why they hate Dave Smith so much, because, you make that pond bigger and they become more irrelevant, and people start noticing how irrelevant they are, and that's their biggest fear.
Absolutely. Well, I know you have to go because you have a date with a boy. But
it got canceled, but yes, I do.
but I do want to ask you 2 questions before we cut this bad boy off. One, how low status was it that we both just compared Michael Malice Twitter interactions with each other?
I don't care. It was funny.
I don't care either. And well, that's the thing. Like, I had this kind of realization not that long ago. Again, I won't name names, but I reached out to a slightly higher tier libertarian personality, and I was like, hey, you know, I wanted to have you on my show. I think some people that I talked to wanted you to be on there, and I didn't even get a chance to get a response from that person. I got a response from his assistant, who sent a very form email to me saying no. Mm-hmm. And I had this moment, and I've had some other moments that I won't go into because I'm not someone who's going to call anyone out for things that aren't important. But there's another person out there who constantly is stealing my tweets or memes and using them to his bigger audience. And I don't get mentioned or anything like that. Don't care, whatever. It is what it is. I'm going to just not be as open to that and make sure everything's so in my voice that you couldn't read it in any other voice. Because that's always been important to me. My voice has always been important because I write the same way I talk, the same way I tweet.
Well, okay, let's go back for a second. I don't think us talking about Malice is necessarily low status, just because, did you listen to the episode where Dave Smith and Malice were talking about Hans Hermann Hoppe? Yeah. And how Malice got an interview with Hoppe and nobody gets interviews, but he managed to get one. And he talks all the time about how the very, very failed podcaster Dave Smith, Tom Woods. They talk about how very failed he is.
Yeah.
But they talk about their interactions. Like Malice, like, I get these interactions, or I talk to these people, or what have you. That's just people who are looking at people that are maybe of a higher status or a higher, level in certain circles, and being able to communicate with them. I mean, Malice is, like, we're here and Malice is way higher. So the fact that there's an interaction, it's just a cool little thing. If we were at Malice's level, if I was able to get a drink with Malice and just talk to the dude as a human being and was at his level, then I probably wouldn't be talking about my interactions with Michael Malice. I'd be talking about how I interacted with a very failed podcaster, Tom Woods, or how I interacted with somebody else, because as you move up in status, the people that are impactful in your interactions move up proportionally as well. So I don't think that's too much of that. Now, as far as people stealing content, that blows, man. Yeah. That's just punching down nonsense.
Yeah, I'm not going to call anyone out for that, but it is something that's been weighing on my level of patience lately. But no, and you're right, because I need to see, because I do look up to Malice. I do admire the guy. And so it's kind of like, do you remember about a year ago, or maybe it was more, where the trailer for, what was the name of that last Star Wars movie? The Last Skywalker. Whatever the last one was called.
I think that's right.
That terrible freaking movie. But
the big letdown.
Yeah. But there was a guy, a nerd, online who was crying because he was so excited. And everyone piled onto him. And everyone talked about how sissy he was or weak or whatever. And there was one girl out there who was a fairly hot woman who was like, and I think Malice has said this before too, the worst kind of person is someone who sees someone enjoying what they enjoy and being happy and talking about what they enjoy and then proceeds to shit on it and try to take away their joy. And so, you know, for me, interacting with Malice is a joy. And I'm happy to share that with you.
Well, I will take issue with that premise, though, because there is no way on God's green earth that I am not going to shit all over furries.
Oh yeah, no, I will literally shit on furries. They'd like it though. So
yeah, I got a specific history with some of those people working in a comic shop.
You son of a gun! You can't mention that at the end. You cannot mention. This is the hook to have you back on, isn't it? Okay. Well, final
So,
question. I have asked this of every person that I've interviewed in the last month or two.
Okay.
Okay, you live close to Hollywood. You probably have
25 miles, yeah.
seen more celebrities in person than I have. There is a lot of anti-pedophile stuff going on, which I applaud. I want all of them to be outed and caught. But here's my question. Of all of the celebrities or politicians, popes, whoever, who would you feel the happiest to see outed as a pedophile and caught in that system? Who would give you vindication? Who's the person out there that you're like, that person touches kids?
I don't know. I some of them just seem too obvious. Like some of the religious leaders or the politicians just seem too obvious. I think the one that would be the most interesting though would be Tom Hanks.
Yeah, that was mine.
Simply because it would break so much of the system.
Yeah.
It would break open the floodgates on that. I think that would be probably the most holy shit one that people would think about, except for
Keanu.
No, I think that. Oh god, that would hurt me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one would hurt. Yeah.
But yeah, mine has been Tom Hanks. For years, I've said something is too nice about this guy. Something puts me off, and I'm skeeved out by Tom Hanks. In recent days, people are going, "Is Tom Hanks a pedophile?" Especially after talking after Ricky Gervais' joke.
Yeah, I feel like the Keanu one would hurt me. That one would be painful.
Well, and I mentioned one that someone said was there because that's my usual follow-up question: is who would hurt the most?
Yeah, that one would be bad. Actually, somebody who actually did get Me Too that hurt was Kevin Spacey.
Yeah,
that one hurt.
Understand that.
Because the first time my wife and I kissed was when we saw November 29th, 1997, when we saw Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. Which is a movie. There's actually you can't see it. You can't even see it right now. But there's actually a sign behind me. If you ever watch my show, there's a sign that's a Stella Artois sign that hits behind me that has the hourly struggle and the episode number on it. And that's actually from Trigger Street Productions, which was Kevin Spacey's production company back when they did the original like Project Greenlight sort of thing. When Stella Artois partnered with him to do short films for independent filmmakers. So that sign's from that. So when he got outed, it was like, do I get rid of this stuff? Nah, I keep it. I don't care. So I think that one hurt. Keanu is a pedophile. That one would break my soul. I would probably stop watching movies for a long time after that.
Yeah. Well, and I'll tell you because I'm sure you're curious, but for me, it would be Steve Martin.
Oh, that's a good one too.
I would die.
Yeah.
I think that the only quote unquote celebrity that will make me cry when they die is going to be, I said quote unquote because it's Ron Paul. Like I might cry when Ron Paul dies, but if I found out that my favorite comedian of all time, Steve Martin, was diddling kids into my life.
Oh, yeah, that would be hard. I saw him with Martin Short at the fair with a friend of mine. We saw them during the tour they did. And yeah, having that come out about him, having to look at the banjo in the wrong way again, that would be terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty close to Hollywood. I've seen a lot of celebrities over the years. I used to volunteer at the Egyptian Theater, so I've seen my fair share for when they used to do premieres and whatnot. The only celebrity that ever caught my attention that I was like, "Ooh, damn," was when I was like 3 feet from what's her face, Natalie Portman, because she is way more gorgeous in person than she is on screen, and that was just one of those holy god.
She was like
moments.
My first real Hollywood love.
Mine was that's not. I can't. No, that was way longer than that. Late teen years. It would have been her. It would have been Keira Knightley and her, which I didn't even realize they were both in Star Wars together until years later. But my first Hollywood love was Christina Ricci.
Okay.
Wednesday Addams.
Yep.
When I was a kid. So yeah.
All right.
Oh, that would suck too.
Yeah. All right. So. We gotta go. You have to not go on a date with a boy now. So you faked me out.
Yeah.
Before we go, please tell the 3 or 4 retarded people that listen to my show where to find you on Twitter, your YouTube, what to type into YouTube, or wherever else you want them to find you.
So I can be found on most social media nonsense and what have you under the username of Hourly Struggle. So like the clock hour, so hourly struggle. That's Twitter, Facebook, Parlor, I think, MeWe, Minds, OnlyFans, Pornhub. I'm not even joking about those.
I'm not going to look.
All of that.
I'm not going to look at those last two.
I just put my regular episodes on there just because it's a You know what's funny? I actually had a video. It was an anti-Amash video about how he's LARPing for the presidency, and Pornhub struck it because they said it was talking about decapitation or something, which I don't even know where that came from. But I've never had I had a YouTube strike for one content thing because I was during the Spike Cohen trans video. I had just copied all the links, and I'm going to not do that on YouTube anymore, but I copied all the links just into the description because I used to do that so people knew what I was talking about. And I accidentally had a link in there that was to this trans dating site, which basically means just porn, because one of the victims, that was the only way I was able to find any data about them was through a reverse image search. And they struck me for that because it was, it's a sex site essentially. And I had to delete that. But that's the only strike I've ever gotten from YouTube. Pornhub took an entire video of mine down. The bastards. But no, you can find me on YouTube at The Hourly Struggle, all that stuff. So Patreon, everything. It's all in it. I use the same name everywhere.
See, I do the same thing. Makes it really easy because I'll tell those 4 people the same thing I tell them every week. If you want to find me, type "This is MLGA" anywhere. You can also email me if for some reason you're a Luddite and still use that kind of technology at cam@mlganetwork.com. But really, Twitter's the best place. That's where I'm saying the most retarded bullshit. So thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it. I've been meaning to do this for so long, and it's not worked out until now. So
thanks for having me.
One of the things I'm considering doing, and I'll put you on the spot here, is to have people on that I like more regularly. So instead of always looking for a new person to talk to, have a little rotation of people that are known entities and fun to talk to. Are you up for maybe coming on more often?
Yeah, I can manage that. I have to, bribe the wife with whatever she is in a demand from me. It's a sliding scale. The more episodes I do, the more she's gonna want. So yeah, I'm sure we can arrange to have conversations about various things.
Man, here and I was hoping you were gonna say no, so I could cut the episode right after you said no. But it is what it is.
No.
All right.
No. Talk to you again. Why would I talk to an inferior beard more than once?
Okay, one last question, because I'm a whore for this. What is your favorite thing about me?
My favorite thing about you, honestly, I would say, I don't want to go into too much depth about it with the people who may not know. So the secret group that we're in on Facebook, how we met, there were people who, we did a Secret Santa, which was just a thing just to do. But there were people who needed help with things, and you helped broker actual charity for people who needed it. Somebody who had family that was coming in, and it's the actual humanity that's behind you, like the actual ability to want to help out other people. Once you look past the sarcasm and the veneer, because I have that as well. I have that cynical sarcasm, talk shit, joke about things as well. But I also try to see the humanity in what exists, and that's honestly why I stayed in that group. I did leave for a very short time because there was a huge blow up between myself and somebody else and whatever. But then
it was a minarchist-anarchist debate. I'm pretty sure
it probably was. But every time I think I'm out, they pull me back in. But that was really what brought me back into that, was that it was the knowing that there was a core group of people that you had brought together and spearheaded, really, that if somebody had an issue, you would actually try to solve it, try to help it. It wasn't just internet bluster and internet bullshit. And I really did appreciate it. That's what I appreciated the most, honestly.
You're the first person to not say my beard, and I know it's because you have this ill-founded idea that yours is better, but I'll take it. And I actually do really appreciate that. I'll wipe the tears away. But everyone who's listening...
No homo.
Little homo. Thank you for listening, and as always, stay sane.